In my research on early stage startups, I found that startups have more of an incentive than incumbent firms to engage in potentially disruptive R&D, as they have nothing to lose and much to gain from disruptive innovation. Marketing is, of course, essential to early stage startups, as it can make or break a new company's success, primarily due to the fact that they have limited resources. But customer acquisition and lifetime value calculations are often challenging for them, and they need to make trade offs between investing in product research and marketing, which can be especially hard for those developing new technologies. And of course, one of the biggest problems of early stage startup founders is trying to achieve too much with too few resources. In fact, I guess might argue that demand is another key issue. Now, he's well positioned to help us navigate these challenges, and we'll get into that in a bit. Hello, and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by SproutWorth.com. I'm Vinay Koshi, and our guest is Avetis Ghazaryan. Avetis, you're a tech entrepreneur with well over a decade of experience in driving growth for early stage tech companies. You've led various marketing initiatives and discovered that the key to achieving exponential demand and pipeline growth lies in aligning marketing efforts with high congregation moments. Now, I'd love to explore that in a bit, but you are the CEO and founder of Growth Hunter, a central hub for momentum marketing designed to assist early stage startups in seamlessly integrating high impact marketing strategies into their operations. I'm curious, was there a particular moment or incident that triggered this journey into creating Growth Hunter to what it is today?
Yes, actually, about 2 years ago, to be specific. I have been leveraging momentum marketing for over 5 years from one company to another. But 2 years ago, I decided to take this concept and I attended a SaaStr event. And it was an interesting opportunity to just connect with B2B experts, like minded people. And my goal was to share the concept and see if it resonates. It was a very interesting set of conversations that I had with multiple people. And it was my realization that this concept is very interesting to people and they are ready to challenge it. And so what we ended up doing, actually, a few people from that group, we got together again and we decided to create a resource hub for momentum marketing. And the intention was to challenge this concept, try it in our companies, in different companies, encourage like-minded people to give that a try, and take the learnings and put that into one website in a centralized repository for momentum marketing. And so the journey started about 2 years ago, and it led to really interesting conversations, connections, people trying this, sharing their experiences with us. I think we're in a very interesting place, finding more and understanding certain gaps that we see different B2B companies have, especially high ticket B2B software companies have. So we're really excited to keep going with this journey and announce some of the upcoming great solutions for them. But yeah, that was the journey. That was the moment.
Given your journey to date, what would you say would be your personal area of strength?
That would be helping companies truly understand their buyer, what matters to their buyer, what is top of mind for their buyer, and be able and help them, challenge them in some cases to think about how to align their messaging, marketing, business development with what's preferred in terms of communication from their buyers. So, really focusing and helping companies with their content strategy, with their communication strategy to align with their buyer preferences. Having done this for a few companies
Mhm.
at this point, I think that's really my expertise. And really, the angle of that is to help companies build reliable and predictable pipeline. At the end of the day, it's been my experience that with early stage startups specifically, one of the main major expectations from marketing or business development teams are to build pipeline. And so those are my triggers. I would say that's where my specialty is understanding the buyer, helping companies understand their buyer every month, every quarter, and build playbooks and build content marketing, business development strategies to align their message and achieve that predictable pipeline growth.
So, in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
That's a great question. And this is what our journey with Growth Hunter led us to. So I had the opportunity to work with over 100 B2B experts across different markets inside the B2B software as a service space. And one of the realizations was we were challenging them to try momentum marketing. And one of the questions with momentum marketing is understanding what's top of mind for your buyers. And the realization was that they know their buyers pretty well to a degree where they understand the major pain points and the leading indicators for those pain points. But they don't really know what's top of mind their buyer today. So if I ask a B2B tech company and I challenge them and say, what is top of mind for your buyer this month, this quarter? And how is it going to be different next quarter? There is a missing piece. And this is where we, by doing this questioning essentially over the past year, it was the realization that there is a gap in communication because you need to truly understand your buyer to make sure you stand out from the noise because it's a very competitive space. And so I would say that's one of the biggest realizations is a gap in understanding the preferences of buyers, what channels, what message they prefer, and most importantly, what's top of mind for them.
Brilliant. I'd love to dive into momentum marketing, but I'd like to ask you this first. If you had to distill your most unconventional, or should I say, unconventional yet highly effective strategy for achieving predictable revenue growth in the B2B SaaS world, what would that strategy be, and what surprising results have you witnessed from it, from implementing it?
I would definitely say one of the strategies that I would always go for is I call it a three-phase approach. And essentially, what it does, it really aligns with identifying a high congregation moment where you try to understand what is top of mind for your buyer in this particular month and a half that's strategically important for them, and then taking and aligning your marketing, content, and business development campaigns and activities around that top of mind topic, that high congregation moment. And I usually my strategy to this is approaching the three phases. And essentially what you do as a company, you challenge yourself to understand how do you fit in within that high congregation moment. So an example would be I usually use this example of Amazon acquiring One Medical, and that's a big momentum, big high congregation moment for health tech companies. For many hospitals, this is a potential big change, especially for practice owners. It's a major challenge. And what this allows to do is essentially what you would do is you start with phase one, where it's really introduction, is challenging yourself as a technology, as a solution provider to think of how can you help those hospitals? How can you help your buyers within that high congregation moment? And really joining discussions, using social media as a channel, using podcasts, using influencer marketing, but just really joining different conversations and as an organization share your unique perspective on how you think those leaders in hospitals can overcome that challenge. What is your perspective? And that usually lasts about week 2 up to 3 weeks, depending on how long the momentum can last. And that moves into phase two, which is once you create this discussion, once you have your viewership, once you have attention from those from those hospital executives, that then you move into phase two. And phase two is really introducing your solution. This is where you bring in your customers, you bring in thought leaders that share your perspective, and you invite them into further discussions. And this is a great opportunity for demand generation because you at this point have the attention of your prospects, of your buyers. You're talking about something that's top of mind for them. And now you're gradually moving into the next phase of introducing what is a potential solution, but not from your perspective, but from a perspective of your customers, from peers or thought leaders in the space. And you could invite Forrester, Gartner, essentially just really inviting thought leaders and peers to continue talking about solutions within that high congregation moment. And phase three, which usually starts at about week 6, is when you start going on the educational part of this, where you start educating the audience on the features, the benefits of capabilities of your solution. So really where the promotion of the product starts. That phase usually lasts 6 to 9 weeks. So altogether you can run 2 or 3 these type of momentum campaigns in a quarter. And that's been my go-to strategy when it comes to leveraging momentums, high congregation moments. And the strategy I would use would be this. And this would incorporate marketing channels, conferences, but also business development. This is a very good inspiration for business development teams when building cold email sequences, cold scripts, is just really aligning with those high congregation moments and following those. three phases.
I'd like to unpick a few things because some of those terms may not be instantly recognizable to some of us. First off, how would you define high congregation moments?
That's a great question. So think of this from your buyer's perspective. Let's say you are targeting hospital executives, CIOs, CEOs, and they are your decision making group. High congregation moment is an event or a topic or a theme that is top of mind for those buyers today. And that is more than just a short news or buzz, right? This is something that probably going to last for a month and a half and is going to stay top of mind. And it also is the requirement for high congregation moment is strategic importance. How strategically important it is for your buyers, the event that you're currently looking into. And I think the example I brought, Amazon acquiring One Medical, is a strategically important initiative, and it also has a large congregation of CEOs and CIOs from hospitals, because this is what everyone is thinking about, Amazon gradually tapping into this market. And so that's a perfect example of what that could be. And it could last a month and a half, and it could have different phases. But usually what happens is there's and one way to identify this is by coverage. You would see a lot of reputable publications covering certain specific topics around that area for a specific period of time. And it's usually a signal of a potential high congregation moment. But that would be one of the examples.
Sure, thank you for that. And momentum marketing, how would you define that?
Momentum marketing would be the process of identifying high congregation moments.
Okay.
And that would be the first step of the process. And the second step of the process would be aligning your messaging, your positioning within that context. So really understanding what is your message? How are you going to position your company, your organization's solution within that framework? So if you are a CRM solution, or if you are a conversational AI solution, what is your perspective of Amazon acquiring One Medical, or Amazon gradually introducing their new features? What is your unique perspective on that? And an example of that could be a company realizing that a shift is happening and patient experience is becoming a requirement, and Amazon is realizing this potential opportunity to improve patient experience. And so you start gradually introducing your perspective as a CRM solution of why patient experience is providing automation, improving digital patient experience is so critical today. And so that is part of momentum marketing, where you identify your messaging, identify your position within the context. And the third phase is the execution, which is leveraging inbound account-based marketing, all the traditional methodologies and principles, but just really aligning those channels within that context. So really creating that content. So that full cycle of identifying moments, understanding how and positioning your company, your unique solution within that framework, and then applying that three-phase approach, whether it's inbound, outbound, or any type of strategy you have, is the sort of the full cycle of momentum marketing.
Now, you said most businesses struggle with understanding or even knowing what is top of mind for people that they're working with in terms of future clients. I'm curious, how do you, what would you say would be the biggest challenge in doing that? And two, how would you recommend people bridge that gap and
Yeah.
elicit that information?
The biggest challenge is, and our realization really from this surveys and research that we have conducted over the past year, was that when we say, let's find those high congregation moments, people are having a hard time getting started. You quickly realize that a lot of organizations are not closely following and reading articles and publications that their buyers are following. You realize that the data they have under their disposal, this doesn't give them the depth of understanding the specific examples or the scope of like how big the high congregation moment is for their customers. It's really the big gap is really just the first question of how do I find high congregation moment? And you are saying this is your sales team or your SDR team when doing cold call. This is one of the questions they can ask. So just really having your finger on the pulse, understanding what's happening in the buyer's world. But the big challenge is those channels, the resources are not allocated to identify those moments or try to understand what's top of mind for buyers on a monthly basis. I'm speaking from early stage startup perspective, but I have happened to notice this with large public companies that I happen to connect as well with SDR teams and their marketing teams. This is also the case there, where certain companies would do market research, which is great. But being able to dynamically do this on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis at a minimum, to understand what is top of mind for my buyers, what are they thinking about, what are they discussing, that there's no connection to that. There is no resource allocation, there is no activity that these companies are performing to stay up to date. And that was the realization. And what we use today are basic, primary, but basic tools such as ZoomInfo data, using third party intent data, using our own first party CRM data, super helpful customer interviews and conversations. Those are critically important, but those are not happening as occasionally. And so I think the realization that we had was really around what else are you doing beyond that? Are you going into conferences just to understand what's top of mind? Is there a motion in place where, aside from generating demand, aside from pitching your organization, your solution, are you really trying to understand what is it that they care about today? And that was the first thing we found. Was it actually feels like people have to take extra steps and do a lot of work to really get there, to understand their buyer and know what's top of mind for them. So that's how we identify that there is actually a gap. If I may, I would like to. A lot of this is based on my interviews, obviously, and the conversations I had. But one of the interesting data points that I think are, in a way, supporting this hypothesis is I recently BenchSight published this numbers on go-to-market ratio, and they looked at marketing and sales spend ratio against new ARR generated. And interesting enough, that number right now is about 260%. In other words, you have to spend 2.6 times more to generate to put $1 in your pocket. And I think in 2019, it was around 160%. I think a good metric is to be below 1.5, 150%. And that is a good indication of you have to spend a lot more, 2.6 times on your marketing and sales to be able to generate new business, which really speaks for this communication gap, which in our observation on it is the primary reasons for that is just really not being fully aligned with your buyer.
But are there specific questions that you tend to use in order to unpack what is top of mind, as opposed to directly asking them what is top of mind?
It's mainly just trying to understand what are your ways today, and this is depending obviously who I'm speaking, what type of B2B expert I'm speaking with. Is it a marketing expert? Is it a sales expert? Is it a business development expert? Because momentum marketing is something that could be applied across, and we have been encouraging people across different departments apply. But for marketers primarily, it's really the question of what are you doing today to stay up to date on what your buyers are thinking about, what's top of mind your buyers. It's really just trying to understand what are they doing to gain that information, and how often are they doing that, and is there a process in place? And those three questions, usually you quickly realize that it's either very minimal or very surface level observations that are being made, trying to understand the buyer, and then there is no repeatability. That type of research would be done probably like the beginning of the year, or when there's the particular project happening, but there's no motion in place where the teams are consistently doing that market research to trying to stay on top and understand what is it that buyers really think about and prefer.
Okay, brilliant. So, from the sounds of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, using playbooks would seem to be a critical element of the process. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Using playbooks, I would even stress proven and tested playbooks. But yeah, playbooks are required for this type of initiatives.
So, could you elaborate on that as to why it is crucial for success in the B2B SaaS space?
It really goes back to one of the things that I mentioned earlier, which is reliable and repeatable pipeline growth is essential for companies at this stage. And what really drives that is the data you use, but then also the playbooks you implement. And as someone who led marketing teams, who led business development teams, you realize that you need to always be ahead of your game. You need to make sure that the playbook you're using today is still driving that consistent pipeline growth, that every quarter, as a leader of those teams, you can with high confidence say you will be achieving your targets, and every quarter you can grow and increase that target. And it really comes down to playbook. I stress the element of proven playbooks and tested playbooks, mainly because time is one of the major factors in early stage companies. As a leader, if you are going to implement a playbook and you're going to reinforce a new playbook into your organization, you really want to have the level of confidence that it's going to work. Any playbook requires implementation, requires the team to adapt to it and feel they are using this in the right motion. There is a proper pace of usage of the playbook. And it usually takes about 3 months to implement and have the whole organization use it successfully. And then another 3 months to start seeing the outcome. And the challenge with playbooks that I see in my experience is that there are many playbooks these days, which is great. That's a lot of resources. But if you're a head of marketing department, you implement that in an early stage startup, and in 6 months you realize that didn't really work out that well, you're risking company's growth. And this is where I agree. I think playbooks are essential for consistent growth and reliable pipeline growth, but they need to be tested and proven. And this is one of the things where I think it's a big challenge for in a B2B space.
What would you say to those who are saying, look, that might have worked some time ago where things were not as fluid as they are today? And with the increased fluidity, perhaps our playbook shouldn't be for, at least, shouldn't be a long term in its execution so that it can iterate pretty quickly and yet stay on top of where the market is heading in order to adapt our strategies and channels accordingly. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, and I would really encourage, and I think in our case, what we found very helpful, and we're working towards solving this problem in the long term, but I think what we have found very helpful is being connected to thought leaders in your space. And this goes to joining collectives, different communities, and trying to connect with people sharing similar roles within the same market or outside of your market. If you're in retail technology space, there is someone in health technology space or any other space implementing something extraordinary. You need to be up to date. As a leader in this role, while you're using your own playbook and it's working, it's always a matter of time. Every playbook eventually becomes old, and it doesn't really provide you that same edge, and it doesn't provide you the same growth. And so, as a leader, my recommendation would be to always stay up to date through communities, through connecting with people on LinkedIn, having 10-15 minute discussion and just connecting with people and really understanding what's working for you, just asking that question and really going in deep to take it further and understand what type of outcomes are you getting from that. How is your team adapting those playbooks? Just trying to go to the bottom of, okay, are you using this playbook? How proven is it? Can I use that playbook? But I think that's exactly what I would recommend to leaders. Marketing, business development is to always stay up to date and always be on a lookout for the next playbook, but also be cautious and be careful and test and prove them before implementing in their organization.
Where does Growth Hunter sit in the space of needing to stay up to date and join various collectives, etc.?
That's a great question. So, Growth Hunter today is that resource hub where you can learn momentum marketing. But Growth Hunter also goes beyond, and it connects like minded people, industry experts, B2B experts in our collective, in helping people to connect, exchange those ideas, exchange those playbooks, but taking it further and trying and continuing to work together. So essentially, the way our community is a bit different, and we have the small groups that we organize, small cohorts that we organize. But our goal and our intention is really to connect like-minded people, to share playbooks together, but also try it and continue working together to make those playbooks work. So I think that's the extension of Growth Hunter beyond being a resource hub, also being a place where like-minded people, B2B experts are connecting to try and uncover the pipeline growth challenge by sharing and exchanging playbooks, exchanging ideas, exchanging experiences, challenges, and solutions. What Growth Hunter is gradually moving towards, and this is what I'm really excited about, is trying to uncover and solve the gap that I've been talking about, essentially making it significantly easier for B2B companies to find what's top of mind for their buyers, be able to understand what is their preferences of communication, which channels, what content they can be using. So essentially, now the research that we have done, the challenges we uncovered, we realized that people want to know more about their buyers. They want to know what channels they prefer to be connected with dynamically every month, every quarter. There is intent, there is hunger for that information. There's hunger for playbooks tested and proven that they can use and implement any given quarter to always achieve that edge, to always have 2 or 3 times higher growth. And that's where Growth Hunter is headed. And that's what Growth Hunter is further uncovering and opening up for us. So very excited about the journey, but that's I think how Growth Hunter can help.
I should have probably asked you this earlier, but for SaaS professionals, how would you say they differentiate between trends and momentums in the market?
It really comes over time when you start quickly better understanding what momentums are. But you can very quickly find the differentiate trend from a high congregation moment by testing it against first, are there big recognizable publications, which I usually use their web traffic to be an indicator for your niche to understand if it's a recognizable publication or not. If multiple publications are covering that story. Now, if they do, that's an indication of this is potential high congregation moment. Are they covering, is the conversation continuing further on social media platforms? Are you seeing thought leaders or same your buyers addressing those challenges, talking about those challenges? That really helps understand the length of the momentum. Is it really a momentum or is it just a short event? You would normally see, for example, that One Medical example was a good one where there was multiple publications covering Amazon's acquisition of One Medical. And then it gradually moved on to further discussions of what it means for the industry. That's a clear indication which you can capture in 3-4 day time interval that this discussion is going. It has wider coverage. It has wider discussion, further discussion from those publications. And it also, your buyers, you can see them talking on different platforms. If I were to lead a team and apply this, one of the recommendations I would have is use your sales and SDR teams to ask that as a question. Hey, we're seeing Amazon acquired One Medical recently. Is this something of importance to you? Why or why not? One or two buyers, if you ask this, at least within that time period, within that window, it's just one or two questions, they can give you a very clear pulse if it's top of mind or not. But again, a lot of these areas, we're realizing that there are no solutions, there are no data really specifically around those high congregation moments that you can use. You could use PR tools, Feedly, Prowly, which could also help identify different topics, different events. But the best way to know about this is really ask your buyer, ask your customer, ask your prospect to verify the significance of it and a potential length of it.
All of what we've been talking about, I would assume, would also lend to being able to position oneself as a thought leader in the specific industry space that you find yourself in. Why, from your perspective, would you encourage people to embrace thought leadership?
It's important to stand out from the crowd. And that's just one of the major reasons, right? If a certain event happens, most probably your competition is using it and mentioning it, referring to it in one way or another. But thought leadership is not mentioning the fact. Thought leadership is really being able to stand out from the crowd and uniquely position your solution, your perspective within that context. I will give you an example just to help the audience better understand this example. One of my companies I worked in the past years ago was Snapstat.io conversational AI solution. And one of the things we did there is we quickly realized there is a congregation moment around Instagram automation, Instagram announcing DM automation. And this was big for a chatbot or conversational AI solution because this was a new channel. It was a high congregation moment because our buyers, e-commerce service leaders, they had interest on Instagram. It was a strategically important channel, and that meant a big solution for their organization. They were having hundreds or thousands of people reaching out, and they were manually going through those responses. This was a big opportunity for them. Now, for us as a conversational AI solution, what we did was we tried to position our perspective on this as an AI solution. There are 5,000 chatbot companies. 5,000. So imagine the scale of this. So how do you stand out from the crowd? Our perspective was consumer. We had data, we had a really good understanding what consumers wanted. And our perspective was this is a channel your consumers want to be. And you need to be there available 24/7. And being able to say this, to speak for this, those different marketing channels, creating content, ebooks, playbooks, conducting interviews, inviting your customers and thought leaders to speak and support this idea really helps differentiate your organization from others. And this is where the three-phase approach comes in, where the first phase, you don't really sell your solution. You just introduce a unique perspective by inviting people, your buyers, your prospects to join those conversations. And so this is, I think, one of the biggest good examples of how you stand out from that crowd by positioning yourself as a thought leader. The outcome could be very interesting. In our case, like any other early stage company, awareness was a big challenge for us. And after running this campaign for 3 months, we attended one of the big conferences happening that quarter. And it was really interesting. We had those one-on-one sessions, and we had the opportunity to connect with prospects we never met before on a one-on-one basis. And they actually brought us up as that thought leader within that Instagram solution. We were not just Instagram solution. We were conversational AI for all channels, but that created that awareness, that recognition. When we met them first time, they already heard about us. Why? Because we were able to position ourselves as a thought leader within that particular theme. And that led and helped us to further expand people's perspective on what the company is and how it actually does this across different channels. But I think that's just an example of the power of leveraging momentum and becoming a thought leader in that space.
Thank you for that. Obviously, low awareness is a challenge for early stage startups. Could you provide examples of how momentum marketing has achieved this? Now,
Let me elaborate a little bit about the challenge of low awareness. What does it mean, especially for early stage startup? The biggest challenge is when you reach out, let's take a hypothetical example of cold outreach, SDR outreach. When they're reaching out over email or over the phone and saying, hey, I'm this and this from this company. The problem with awareness is that company doesn't ring a bell. That company is not familiar at all. And so this is what you really are struggling with, right? It's if you're an unfamiliar organization, they never heard of you before, we're introducing this revolutionary, disrupting solution in a very disruptive way, that is not necessarily enough for you to stand out of the crowd. And so I think this is one of the biggest challenge with awareness is it's awareness really, it's really brand awareness, especially with early stage companies. I've never heard of you, so I don't really have that trust. And so where momentum marketing comes in is it allows these businesses, these organizations to use something that's top of mind for the buyer, where buyer is really focused and trying to look for a solution and become that light, become that voice within that discussion. And so this gradually creates this trust. If I don't know you, but I've heard of you and I've heard your unique perspective on how you think you can help me as a leader in my space, that allows you to build that trust in the short term. Typical and a very familiar way of building trust is inbound marketing, where you generate content, you develop thought leadership that takes 9, 12, 24 months to achieve that trust. And momentum marketing, what it does, it really just accelerates that motion. You would still follow traditional inbound methodology. You will create content for different parts of the funnel and gradually educate and lead your buyer from one stage to another. But the angle you choose, the topic you choose, the way you choose to position yourself within that particular quarter to introduce your perspective is what momentum marketing does. It allows you to create this really one specific prism of how you introduce your solution. And that allows to create this thought leadership, to create this trust between the buyer and yourself. And this is what really helps then overcome the awareness challenges. Once you establish that connection, your buyer now trusts you. Your buyer now thinks of you as someone who can help them, or at least have someone who has a unique perspective on how you can help them overcome that challenge. Again, whether it's the DM automation of Instagram example that I brought up, or if it's one Amazon acquiring One Medical and hospital leaders thinking, what's the next thing for patient automation? That is a great momentum marketing gives you that great opportunity in a very short term to build that trust and gain your buyer's attention.
I'm curious. So, if you're looking at accelerating the motion with momentum marketing, how would you pick, especially early stage startups that are very early on in the piece, how would you suggest they examine the market and pick a particular, what should I say, content angle or marketing strategies that would provide a tangible ROI within, say, the first quarter, as opposed to waiting for 12 months to see some results from it?
Yes, yes. So that's a great question. And today, our recommendation and how we're challenging momentum marketing is identifying 2 to 3 high congregation moments, the way I described earlier, where you see a wide coverage, your buyers, your prospects are confirming that those events are actually strategically important for them. And you identify 2 to 3 of those events at any given quarter. It could be a week or 2 week apart, but really just identifying and trying to build your unique positioning within that context. And I recommend 2 3 because our observation has been that usually from 2 to 3, if you're right 1 to 2 times at a time, you are achieving at least 2 to 3 times growth. You don't really need all three momentum campaigns to work necessarily, but you really want to bet on 2 or 3 campaigns that allows you to diversify, but then find your unique angle within each momentum and position yourself. Vinay, one of the important things, however, to note is this doesn't change your strategic positioning in any way. As a company, you need to have a longer term strategic narrative that is on your website, that is on your homepage. What this really does is think of it as a sub narrative within the big story. And I think this is like the limitations, if you may, like the borders that allows you to understand how far can I go with this. Is you want to limit yourself within your major narrative. Does this angle that I'm thinking about positioning my company within this momentum or high congregation moment that I've identified, does this really align with our major strategic narrative? And if it doesn't, that's a sign where you're probably not tapping into the right event, or there is not much you can say within this event. But use that your strategic narrative that the company, your major positioning strategy that your company has identified as a way to decide, can I or should I not be positioning myself this way? If it's off from your major narrative, then don't. And the example I brought earlier, the Instagram automation, it actually was a really good way of aligning with our major narrative, because our narrative was really around the consumer. Your consumers today, and our message back years ago, but our message was really your consumers want you to be on messaging channels 24/7. That was backed with numbers, and that was what we were finding from consumers. And so this very nicely supported the idea of, now this is another channel where it's gradually opening up, which just continues to support the idea that more and more people want to expand and be on messaging channels and connect with brands on messaging channels. So again, it's use your major narrative to identify, can I put this under as a sub narrative under this big story that I'm running as a company, but in no way jeopardize or change your major narrative. You should never do that. It should always be true and into your main positioning strategy. Again, what try to further think of it as an extension. Is just trying to further help your buyers understand how that major narrative works within that context. Yeah.
Great point there. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also thinking of the challenges that SaaS professionals often encounter when trying to implement new marketing or sales strategies. You certainly touched upon one of the challenges, but are there other challenges that you find they often grapple with?
Well, specifically with momentum marketing, it's time. I think it's just really people are ambassadors. People who try and speak for momentum marketing and they test and challenge it, we call that team ambassadors. Our ambassadors, what they have found is that it takes time for organizations today to identify and implement those strategies. So this is one of the areas where we're continuously pushing momentum marketing, and this is where the new solution comes into play, where we want to make it much more effortless to be able to identify a momentum and then be able to create a strategy quickly, content strategy, everything in one that you can implement and start launching those momentum marketing campaigns. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges is being able to quickly identify and implement and incorporate that into your strategy. A major reason, again, really goes back to understanding the buyer and understanding how your solution fits into different momentums. And I say this mainly because people who do this more often, momentum marketing, who implement momentum marketing quarter after quarter, they become very fast at it because it allows them to be very close to their buyers. And if you are, as a marketing leader, the one who creates the positioning of the company or is part of creating the positioning, the main narrative, you can quickly see angles and areas of, okay, if this is top of mind for my buyer, this is how specifically we can incorporate momentum marketing into play. But unfortunately, that pulse is missing today. That connection with the buyer is unfortunately missing today with majority of companies. And so getting started with something like this seems like a major project. But once you're in, you're hooked, because again, it really goes back to the outcome that it's driving, and you can clearly see the campaign ran within momentum marketing and a traditional campaign that's built on regular information, that data points you use. The difference is significant. It's usually 2 to 3 times more engagement, more positive responses, more meetings generated, more demo requests generated versus the other one.
In this area of creating predictable growth, especially with early stage startups, is there perhaps an area or two that you find doesn't get much airtime? If so, what would they be?
That's a good question. And this probably goes back to my belief in achieving predictable, reliable pipeline as an early stage company is know your buyer, have a playbook that's tested and proven that your buyer prefers. And what I mean by this is over time, your playbooks really align with the time, the frequency, what channels they prefer. So if you really know your buyer, what channels, what messaging to send to your buyers at any given time, and you have that dynamic feeling, you have that consistency quarter over quarter, identifying the right information, the right data points, and applying that into your marketing campaigns, that's really what you need to achieve consistency. And I think what doesn't get that air time, it really goes back to the mindset of many organizations today is not allocating enough resources consistently, month or quarter over quarter, into understanding their buyer, interviewing their customers, connecting with their customers, and truly trying to understand what is it that they care about today and how their organization can align. I think, and this is just because simply because we haven't explored this area much yet. But I think over time, hopefully with AI and everything happening today, with this type of things are going to be faster and more efficient. And my hope is that more and more companies are going to be much closer to their buyers. And there's going to be a motion in place with AI or with a hybrid approach of AI and humans where that can happen more effectively, but it will be happening more consistently. And I think this is what's not getting the airtime, unfortunately, today.
Okay, this has been a fascinating discussion. I think we've covered a fair bit of ground. But to wrap things up, Avetis, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Know your buyer. I need to know my
Yeah.
buyer much better. And just really challenge yourself and your team. And this is not a new thing. Dan Kennedy and many thought leaders over time have spoken about this and how you can just really align, just put yourself in the shoes of your buyer, but do more often. As I think the realization is if you do that more often and you challenge yourself and your team, whether you're marketing, BDR teams, any organization, commercial organization, challenge yourself to understand your buyer and then think about how can you be more relevant to your buyer today at this moment. That combination done consistently is what's going to help you be more successful in driving repeatable and reliable pipeline. And that would be my biggest takeaway from today's conversation.
Terrific. Vedas, if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Definitely our website, which is www.growthhunter.com or avetis@growthhunter.com. Please reach out to me directly. I'd be more than happy to be a resource. You can also connect me with me on LinkedIn. But I think, yeah, just definitely check out our website. There are a lot of interesting things coming up, and I highly recommend staying up to date in the month of March.
Okay, brilliant. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Vedas, thank you so much for doing this. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for having me, Vinay. Great conversation.